What's going on, guys? This is how to build a link shortener with Ruby on Rails 6 part 2. Just a quick reminder, if you want to test out our SaaS in a box SaaS starter kit for free, you can download the code base by clicking on the link just below the video. It's essentially a Ruby on Rails 6 code base that should save you a few weeks of work if you're trying to launch some sort of subscription-based product. With that said, let's go ahead and kick off our next lesson here, or episode. So what we're going to do, in the last video, we looked at building out this shortener service, and it's, as you can see, super ultra simple. It's essentially one line of code that parses the URL and spits out the first 7 characters of a hex digest. But we did write out a few good tests, got a little bit of familiarity with TDD. So we're going to continue with that here. And in this video, we're going to start working on the model. So we're going to add a new folder here in the spec for models. So let's close a few of these things here. And let's open up our spec models. And so what we're going to do in here is create a new file, and we're going to talk about what models are in just a second if you're not familiar. So what we're going to do is call this the, let's call it the link model. So we'll call this link spec.rb. And we'll do the same thing as last time, require Rails helper. And then we'll do rspec.describe link do, and actually let's think about this for a second. Is there, I wonder really quick if there's anything in Rails called a link. I don't think so, but I just want to, okay, uninitialized constant link, so we should be fine. I have named things before where I wrote a name that conflicted with something that was built in Rails, and I'm trying to avoid that, but that seems to be fine. So let's just run our tests here. Okay, so we get this uninitialized constant link. So we already have a models folder that comes with Rails. So what we're going to do here is just create a new file. We're going to call it link.rb, class link. And this is a model, and it needs to inherit from application record. And we'll run our tests again, and we should be green. If you're new to all of this, so far this may be a little bit confusing, but one thing to just note is that models are essentially classes in Ruby which talk to the database. So if you want to store something into the database and use that data, you're going to be working through a model file. So let's think a little bit about how we want to test this and what we want it to do. So we could write up a couple of quick tests for it always has an original URL. And we could write up another one that's it always has a lookup code. So what we want to do is say, well, hold on a minute. How can we do this? So we could say something like link equals link.new, and then say original URL. And I'm actually going to grab, kind of like reusing some of the same stuff, so I'm going to grab this URL. And let's say that we want to do a short code of, well, let's actually combine these. It always has a original URL and a short code. And the short code should be, let's just make it like 7 things, doesn't matter. And we'll say link dot save. How can I do this? Link dot save, and then expect. Let's just actually, we're writing in a lot of code here. Let's run this and see what happens. It may blow up on us already. So active record statement invalid, could not find table links. Okay, so what we're going to do here is delete this link file. So we wrote this file to just get the to get everything passing, but we don't really want to do everything else by hand. There's some shortcuts we can take, so I'm just going to move this to the trash. This will get regenerated automatically. I'll say Rails G model link, and then we're going to tell it what attributes we want and what type they should be. So we'll say lookup code string and original URL string. And we may need more later, and if we do, we'll add it, but for now we're just going to start here. And so it's asking us, do we want to overwrite our link spec? So what I'm going to do really fast is just copy everything I have here, and then I'm going to say yes because I want to see what they put in here by default. Okay, so we force it over, and it really didn't do much extra, so let's just copy this. I'm going to keep their type model. Again, I'm not necessarily a testing expert, something I'm working on, but I'm going to just keep this here, and we'll see what happens. Okay, so now if we run our spec, probably won't get, I'll have to run the migration, sorry, Rails Db Migrate. So what this does, this actually updates the database with our new stuff we just ran. So whenever you run this Rails G model, it creates a couple of things. It creates this model file up here. It obviously, once you have RSpec installed, created a spec or tried to. And it also creates in the database down here, it creates this migration file, which essentially talks to the database and tells it how to create the different columns and stuff. So we're not going to go super deep into that for now, but that's a little quick explanation. So now let's run our tests and see where we are. So now I think we should be green again. Nope. Unknown attribute short code. What did I call it? Lookup code. Right. Lookup code and lookup code. Let's try that. Okay, so now we're green. So instead of saving this, what I want to do is say expect link.valid to be true. So basically, valid essentially means that this record doesn't have any problems and that you can save it. And we'll see more about what that means in a second, but I expect this to still pass. So what we want to do is actually create some cases where it will fail. And so I'm going to say it is valid if it has an original URL and a lookup code. Oh, that's not what I wanted. So I'm going to say it is invalid if it, let's say, does not have a lookup code, okay? And here we're going to say to be false. So now we'll run this again and we should get a failure. Okay, so now we need to actually add some code to our link file, which is here. Alright, so what we're going to do is say, what do we start with? We started with the lookup code, so we're going to say validates presence of lookup code. And let's run the test. So this is just a built-in validation that we can use, and we'll do the same thing for the original URL. It is invalid if it doesn't have an original URL. Okay, so now we'll just say lookup code here and do our 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And we'll expect this to be false, and we should see a failure here. And as you guess, we'll go back and we will fix it. And I believe we can just do original URL right here, and it will take both, and it should be fine. Yeah. So we really just need to do one more thing in here. We need to come down and say it is invalid if the lookup code already exists. So basically we don't want to allow there to be two of the same, because then you wouldn't know which one to look up, right? So what I'm going to do is copy this first example that we put together, and then we're going to say link.save. And I'm going to do this again, and I'm going to make this to be like link to, and we'll say how to bake again, I think is one of the examples we used before, and then we'll say expect link.valid to be false. That should be link 2 actually. And let's run this and we should see a failure. So to fix this, we can just do validates uniqueness of lookup code. And let's run the test. Okay, cool. So we're green again. So the next question you might be thinking is, should we validate uniqueness of the original URL? And I'm going to say no for now. So, you may have users who are paying or not for the product, and you may want to give them stats on how their different links performed, how many clicks they've gotten, and so on and so forth. And if you made it so that the original URL was unique in the system, you would not be able to have the same, or have different users share the same link and then get get stats on how their links are performing, because it would just be one global link. There's other ways you could architect that, so maybe that doesn't matter as much, and you might want to make it so that they're unique and scoped to that user and whatever, but for now I'm just going to leave it alone, because I don't think that it's really important to validate that right now. So with that, I believe we have our model set up the way that we want it. In the next video, what we're going to do is actually start working on our shortener again to make it so that it runs this whole process. So you'll understand better what that means after the next video. And then in videos 4 and beyond, we're going to be working on the actual front end, setting up the controllers and the views so that we can actually do this in a browser instead of just through the tests. But with that, that is it for this video, so I'll talk to you in the next one.